They didn't even know we were coming. That's the part that still gets me. After everything, after all the species, they'd conquered the thousands of civilizations they'd broken and bent. Under their so-called council of ascendancy, they didn't think we would matter to them. Earth was a primitive dirt ball with scattered colonies in old nukes, not even worth the paperwork. And so when the ascendancy fleet arrived in the outer rings of the Proxima system, they didn't scan deep enough. They didn't look close enough. They missed her, the SSV Banshee, first of her class, silent running assault dreadnought, carbon dark armor duality, reactors, atmospheric disruptors, and the rail cannons. God help whatever's in front of them. We called her Banshee for a reason, because if you ever heard her coming, you were already dead. I was on board, Lieutenant Commander Ren Varric. Weapons Deck 3, I had front row seats the day humanity finally took the gloves off. The ascendancy entered our sector in formation, clean, sharp, arrogant. 12 ships, 3 command corps, 8 assault destroyers, 1 collector class. That last one's job, planetary harvesting, translation, stripping out resources and leaving the surface cold and dead. They'd done it before. I watched them do it to row 7 back when I was green and soft, screamed orders at the screen. Couldn't stop any of it, not this time. They didn't hail, didn't warn, they didn't think they had to. We weren't supposed to be out here. Our signal was masked beneath the asteroid field in orbit. We waited, dead silent, letting them move right into the kill zone. Captain Drevin stood motionless at the command rail, not even blinking. Old war dog didn't say much, but every word that did leave his mouth could drop temperatures by 10 degrees. Fire control, he said without turning. Verify targeting. My finger hovered over the confirm. Target locks confirmed, all primary. Rails hot, pulse cannons charged, impact variance within 6 meters. We're green across the board, sir. He nodded once. Send them a message, and I did. First rail cannon shot hit their lead destroyer amidships, cut through its power core like a scalpel through wet meat. It didn't explode. It folded back in half like it was suddenly ashamed of itself, collapsed into a blossom of fire and steel. Before the wreckage even finished spinning, the Banshee spat 4 more rounds into the formation. 2 more ships went dark instantly. The rest, confused, panicked. They never expected resistance, let alone something that could kill them in seconds. Their first mistake was assuming they were the apex. Their second was underestimating how fast humans learn from defeat, and their last was thinking we'd still play fair. Their command ship scrambled, tried to launch interceptors, but the Banshees' pulse cannons hummed and blinked half of them out of the sky before they even cleared the hangars. I watched their fleet comms go from calm to chaos in under 30 seconds, screaming in alien tongues, signal overlaps, warnings too late to be useful. And still we hadn't moved. We hadn't even moved. We were parked in a shadow and firing hell into the stars. I saw one of their ships try to swing around, attempting to flank. Smart, too slow. Our AI core had already calculated trajectory and snapped a kinetic burst into its drive engine. It spun out, hemorrhaging power and bodies into vacuum. 4 ships remain now. You could feel the fear from them. Their formation broke. They ran. Humans don't chase for fun. We chase to finish, and the Banshee was born to finish. But just then something changed, not in them, in us, because what we found on their last ship wasn't what we expected. And that's when the real war started. They scattered like insects under a burning sun, 4 ships left, all breaking formation in blind panic. Their so-called ascendancy discipline crumbling in the face of real war, our kind of war. That's when you realize they were used to winning before the first shot was fired, used to rolling over cowards, peacekeepers, and diplomats. But Earth didn't raise cowards. Earth raised monsters who learned violence the hard way. I watched the last destroyer make a full burn away from our position, didn't even bother covering the collector ship like they'd written it off. The collector, a hulking, slow-moving thing with hundreds of energy siphons welded along its spine, stayed dead in space, paralyzed. No shields, no weapons, just waiting. I didn't like it. Orders? I asked, glancing at the captain. Drevin didn't answer right away. His eyes were locked on the hologram, watching the collector. The room was silent except for the low hum of reactors underfoot and the quiet thrum of our heart rate monitors in the HUD. Then softly, "We boarded it." I blinked. "Sir, you want to board an ascendancy collector ship? It could be rigged. Trap suicide." He turned to me, and I swear his voice dropped an octave. "You see that movement in the lower hull section?" I zoomed in. There it was, heat signatures, dozens of them, not ascendancy. Human. Cold gripped my chest. We didn't even know they'd taken prisoners. An hour later I was in a black suit, mag clamped to the outside of a collector-class ascendancy vessel, 20 km off the debris field we'd left behind. Our kill zone looked like a graveyard, metal torn and floating, drifting pieces of what used to be superior technology. Now it was just fuel for the scavengers. My unit, Ghost Team 9, wasn't built for diplomacy. We breached with heat lances, burned a hole in their hull, and dropped in like death in vacuum, silent, fast, brutal. The inside of that ship wire of antiseptic and fear. White walls, curved halls, seamless doors that responded to biometric scans. We bypassed all of it. Room by room we cleared. No resistance. That was the worst part, the silence. No guards, no defense units, no drones. Just the low, pulsing hum of life support and the occasional flicker of alien script along the walls. And then we found them, humans caged, naked, emaciated, packed into rows of transparent cells like zoo animals left to rot. Some were from row 7. I recognized the facial tattoos, mining clans. Others wore what was left of colony uniforms from Efren base, which we'd lost contact with 2 years ago. Few were just kids. They didn't speak. When they saw us, some blinked slowly, uncomprehending. One woman collapsed, sobbing when we cut her door open. Another tried to punch me, feral, broken, trained by pain to see every shape and armor as the enemy. We didn't talk. We just unlocked every cage one by one and let them feel human. Again, back in the Banshee's medbay, though, horror unfolded in slow motion. We ran decontamination scans, everything. Some of the prisoners had been experimented on, limbs replaced, bones restructured, neural implants that linked pain thresholds to obedience levels. The ascendancy hadn't just taken prisoners. They were trying to make humans into something else, something controllable, something useful. Drevin stood at the viewing deck over the medbay, watching one of the children sleep under observation. She couldn't have been more than 7. Had wires in her spine, no name, no words, just flinches and tears. He looked at me. They weren't here for resources. I nodded grimly. They were testing us. No, he said, voice razor sharp. They were studying us. We didn't wait for authorization. Command wouldn't have given it anyway. Too much risk, too much heat on the political side, but Drevin wasn't built for politics, neither was I. We targeted their central beacon station at Harkv. That's where Ascendancy files were uploaded post-harvest, logs of every planet, every prisoner, every experiment. It was also heavily defended, 6 turrets, 2 patrol cruisers, orbital minefields, Banshee. Went dark again, full stealth, no comms. Ran quiet, we slipped through their net like a phantom, then we hit them hard. The first volley took out the eastern comm array. They couldn't even call for help. The second ripped open their hangar bay before a single fighter launched. We surgically peeled the station open like a fruit. No fancy tactics, no mercy. We butchered them, and the AI core dumped the data files directly into our drive. You know what we found? A full breakdown of human adaptability metrics, pain tolerance thresholds, neural overwrite potentials, estimates of how long it would take to make us loyal. The Ascendancy didn't fear humanity because we were violent. They feared us because we could never be owned. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt something colder. Rage, the kind that crawls under your skin and lives there, the kind that wants blood, not justice. I remember looking at those files and seeing Earth's name listed under Phase 4. Subjugation timeline. 2 cycles, that's all we had left before they came for home, and we just fired the first real shot. The war had begun now. Not the pretty kind, not the kind with negotiations and formal declarations. This was going to be a dirty war, a human war. We wouldn't meet them in open battlefields, not yet. We'd hunt them from the shadows. We'd tear their ships from the inside out. We'd make the void scream with the sound of metal breaking, and we'd leave messages behind in every burning wreckage. We are not prey, we are your extinction. And the Banshee, she'd be our reaper, because now the Ascendancy had truly seen a human warship, and the galaxy would never forget what happened moments later. 3 days after we burned Harl V to ash, the galaxy finally realized Earth wasn't just another backwater. We intercepted a transmission not directed at us. No, the Ascendancy still didn't acknowledge humanity in open channels, but the tone had changed. Gone was the board's superiority in their voice notes, their diplomatic reports. This was clipped harsh, afraid. Unidentified hostile activity in Sector 14, potential Class Z insurgency. Recommend full sanitization protocol. Class Z, that was their highest threat rating, and it was assigned to us, not because we had numbers, not because we had more ships, but because we were unpredictable, because one ship had turned an entire fleet into smoke and turned their own prisoners into something they feared more than extinction. Survivors. Back on the Banshee, Command tried to leash us, a tight banded message full of typical Earth Gov restraint. I remember the Admiral's voice crackling through the encrypted line. Stand down, await further orders. Diplomatic contact in progress with Ascendancy on voice. No further hostile engagements are authorized. You are to Return to lunar base for debrief and asset recovery. Dreven played the message twice, then deleted it. He looked at me calm as always. They want peace. We want payback. I nodded. What do we do? He turned toward the bridge. We disappear. And just like that, the Banshee went dark again. We weren't going home, not yet. We had other plans. Our next move wasn't to attack another station, not yet. We needed fuel, we needed stealth, materials, and most of all, we needed information. The Ascendancy didn't operate like Earth's militaries. They used layers, civilian contractors, robotic vassals, slave labor, mercenaries. They outsourced the ugly work to creatures they didn't care about. That made it easy to find a weak link. We found it orbiting a dead moon in the Pharaoh's Belt, a refueling platform manned by a dozen unarmed grunt species and 2 cowardly Ascendancy officers who thought they were stationed in a safe zone. It was a mistake. They didn't live long enough to regret. We boarded in the middle of their sleep cycle, took the place without a shot fired. The crew, we let them leave, sent them back in an escape pod with one message carved into the hull: you enslaved us. Now we free ourselves. Inside we found data caches, transcripts, rotations, hidden files that showed just how far the Ascendancy had planned their reach. They were building a weapon, not a bomb, not a cannon, a behavioral virus, neural level, something they called compliance. Thread Alpha 13. It would embed in the brain through airborne nanite particles and suppress violent tendencies against Ascendancy command DNA. They weren't going to fight humanity. They were going to pacify us, turn the future into obedient shells. I stood in the lab they left behind, staring at the glass case that held a sample injector unit. Next to it was a manifest. It listed 20 colonies targeted for early stage dissemination. Earth was on that list. I clenched my jaw so hard I felt something crack in my teeth. We burn it all, I said quietly. Back on the Banshee, Ghost Team 9 prepped for infiltration. Our mission: infiltrate the Covenant Vault, a deep space Ascendancy research lab orbiting the starless expanse of Gamma Null. That's where they were synthesizing the behavioral virus. We didn't need to capture it. We didn't want to. We just wanted to erase it from existence. The lab was protected by an energy net and 2 Vanguard Frigg, standard procedure. But what they didn't expect was a stealth dreadnought running on heat, dampened protocols, and fueled by pure hatred. We slipped into orbit on low spin, launched boarding pods manually, and rode magnetic slingshot entry into their core deck. The lab was a nightmare. Glass walls, tanks full of suspended human bodies twitching under nerve stimuli. Their brains were wired open like circuits. Some were screaming without mouths, others were lobotomized but kept alive for strain monitoring. The lead scientist was there, not a warrior, just another soft-spoken Ascendancy intellect talking in whispers to his AI assistant. He didn't scream when we breached. He just blinked behind his lenses and said, "It's too late. Your kind is already infected." I pulled my sidearm and put 2 rounds through his skull before he finished his sentence. Dreven lit the place up. We didn't just destroy the virus samples, we turned the lab into a tomb. And we left another message broadcast on a tight public frequency just long enough for their satellites to pick up. You want obedience, you'll choke on our defiance. That's when they started hunting us. Hard, 3 fleets deployed. Triangulated search vectors they sent. Tracking drones, bounty ships even. Rumors of telepathic seekers built too. Find humans by scanning thought. Patterns didn't matter, they were too slow, too dumb, too used to wars with rules. This wasn't a war anymore. This was vengeance with a heartbeat. We become ghosts. And the Banshee, she wasn't a warship anymore. She was a legend. Every system we hit, every outpost we crippled, the word spread. There's a human ship that can't be caught. There's a crew that doesn't take prisoners. There's a war coming, and Earth has already started it. What we didn't know, what none of us expected, was that the Ascendancy had been watching our tactics closely, and they'd found our weakness, not in our tech, not in our numbers, in our mercy. It was near the edge of the Icarus divide that we found it, a distress call. Human-coded, a mining freighter from Earth's early expansion days, abandoned, floating with hull damage and a weak oxygen signal. We answered it too fast, too eager. We docked, we boarded, we found bodies. Dozens. Some were still warm. Then the lights shut off, the Banshees. Connection severed, our suits went dead. And we heard the hiss of atmospheric locks. They'd lured us in, and now we were trapped. It was supposed to be a dead ship. The distress beacon was old, encoded in pre-expansion era Earth protocols, the kind only miners and haulers used during the early colonization rush. The hull bore familiar scars, drill marks, heat scoring, and one long gash across its underbelly that looked like a laser shear. The ID tag read Helios Venture. I remember seeing that name on old EarthNet memorials. A missing freighter, presumed lost with 84 lives, but when we stepped on board, everything was too neat, too deliberate. The bodies were fresh, too fresh, still warm, still bleeding. Something's wrong, I whispered, sweeping my rifle through the corridor. The lights flickered above. The floor plating was damp with condensation, not common in a ship supposedly dead for a decade. Ghost Team 9 had split into 3 squads. Mine went toward engineering. Drevin took command, heading to the bridge. As soon as he stepped into the command hallway, the bulkhead slammed shut. We were cut off. Lights dimmed. A sharp hiss echoed through the ventilation shafts. Oxygen levels dropping. Came the voice in my earpiece. Suit integrity compromised. Filters not responding. And then the final blow. Banshee. Connection lost. They done it. The Ascendancy had outmaneuvered us. They lured us with a ghost signal, rigged the freighter with inhibitors, and severed our line to the ship. I turned, trying to rewire the auxiliary console near the maintenance hatch when I felt it, that low vibration under the floor. Heavy pace, deliberate movement. I snapped, Deck 4, something's on this ship with us. No response. The comms were going dark. One by one, we weren't dealing with machines this time. This wasn't the usual security drone garbage or plasma turrets. No, what the Ascendancy had placed on this ship was something else. Something alive. I saw it first when Private Hearn opened a side hatch. It stood maybe 7 ft tall, bipedal, armored. But wrong. The arms were elongated too flexible, the fingers metallic like surgical tools. It had no face, just a smooth black surface where a head should be, etched with glowing red lines that pulsed like veins. It didn't run. It didn't roar. It just stared. Then it moved fast, so fast a blur of metal and Wet sound, Hearn didn't even scream. 1 second he was beside me, the next he was gone. His body collapsed against the bulkhead, head twisted nearly backward. I opened fire, the rounds went through it, but nothing dropped it. It moved like smoke, like it was made of shadow and rage. 3 more went down in seconds. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were meat in a cage. We regrouped in the cargo hold. Dreven's squad had fought their way back, but they'd lost too. Sergeant Greaves had his chest torn open, breathing only through a stim patch. He wouldn't last long. Doc tried to stabilize him, but the ship's medbay was offline. Ascendancy experiment, Dreven said, panting as he wiped blood off his visor. Not a drone, biosynthetic, probably designed to learn as it kills. I nodded, locking down the bulkhead. It's hunting us. No, he said, it's watching us. That made my stomach twist because he was right. It didn't need to kill us fast, it wanted something else. Fear. We tried to reroute power, tried to reboot the beacon and trigger a distress signal to the Banshee, but everything we touched rerouted back into the ship's own systems. It wasn't just a trap, it was a test chamber. Someone was watching this recording, studying. They wanted to see how humans react under pressure, under terror, under hopelessness. One by one it picked us off. Private Rhea went mad first. We found her scratching her skin raw, screaming about voices in the vents. She put a sidearm to her throat and pulled the trigger. Before we could stop her, it didn't even blink. It was working. The thing was breaking us. On the 3rd day we found the control room. It was sealed by 2 layers of ascendancy code, but Dreven used the old trick, wiretap a power feedback loop into the breaker and force the lock to interpret the voltage as a command override. Inside we found them 2 ascendancy monitors, not soldiers, scientists. One was already dead, throat slit probably by the other when things went south. The second one was alive, crawled into a vent, bleeding from his side, not dead yet but close. You don't understand, he whispered, voice raspy and wet. We weren't trying to kill you. You're failing, I said, raising my weapon. He chuckled, coughing blood. No, you're passing. I didn't get it. Passing what? He blinked slowly. We thought if we gave humans enough fear, you'd finally surrender, finally submit, but you're not like the others. You evolve through suffering. Where is it? I demanded. He smiled. Behind you. I turned just in time to see it drop from the ceiling. It hit me like a train, slammed my back into the floor, sent my weapon skittering away. My visor cracked. It was stronger now, faster. It had learned our patterns. It had learned us, but there was one thing it didn't understand: desperation. I grabbed the emergency torch on my hip, flipped the igniter, and shoved the blade straight into the thing's midsection. Molten plasma screamed as it sliced through armor and tissue. It howled, not a machine sound, not a creature sound. Something worse, it sounded human. I drove it deeper, burning through circuitry, pumping heat until my hand blistered. The thing bucked, threw me off, slammed into the bulkhead, and crashed through the floor. Gone for now. We limped back to the upper deck. We found the communications relay, manual, old tech. Dreven didn't hesitate. He grabbed the exposed line, hooked it into his exo suit battery, and triggered a pulse. It cost him. His body went rigid from the surge. Blood spilled from his nose and ears, but the line opened For 5 seconds, just long enough for the Banshee to hear us, they came in hot. She burst through the darkness like a black comet, pulsy turrets firing in all directions. She tore into the hull of the freighter, blew an entire section apart, and exposed our floor to vacuum. The creature, whatever was left of it, was sucked into space, trailing sparks and pieces we didn't even wait. The Banshee's extraction team pulled us out fast. Dreven was still breathing. Barely. I had burns on half my side, but I was whole. We made it back, but we were no longer the same crew. Something inside us changed on that ship. Not fear, not weakness, focus. In the Banshee's medbay, I sat beside Dreven's bunk. He turned to me, one eye half shut. From the swelling, you get the message, he whispered. I nodded. Loud and clear. He managed a bloody smile. They're scared of us. 3 days after we escaped the Helios trap, the Banshee was silent, not dead, never dead, just coiled. We'd been hit harder than anyone admitted out loud. Ghost Team 9 lost 5 men, 2 were killed outright, and 3 couldn't take the psychological fallout. Our ship's AI Cora marked them as temporarily unfit for combat, but we all knew what that meant. One had tried to suffocate himself in cryo, another had jammed his neural port into a raw circuit node. Last just sat in the observation deck, staring into the void, whispering numbers that didn't make sense, and Dreven, our captain, the iron bastard, who stared down annihilation without blinking, hadn't left medbay since we pulled him out. His vitals were steady, but his brain waves were off, Doc said. It was electrical trauma. I didn't buy it. That experiment on the freighter, it hadn't just studied us, it had spoken to us. Not in words, but in sensation, in pressure. It had gotten inside our heads, and it left something behind. Something hungry. I took command, not officially, no rank shifts, no ceremony. I just walked into the war room, and people looked at me like I was supposed to give orders. So I did. Open the blacklist, I told Cora. She hesitated. Authorization required. Protocol 15. Overwrite it. Another pause, then confirmed. Blacklist opened. There it was, a classified set of targets that EarthGov kept hidden even from fleet commanders. Facilities the Ascendancy denied existed, hidden research centers, slave processing hubs, vaults of stolen tech. I picked one. Calera Drift. Officially it was an asteroid mining colony, unmanned, unremarkable. Unofficially, it was where the Ascendancy broke human prisoners they couldn't control. I remembered the name because I saw it listed next to an 8-year-old girl we'd pulled from the collector ship. She was listed as Test 63A. Psychological thresholds in early cognitive development. They'd used her to test how much trauma a child could endure before the brain stopped forming memories. She still hadn't spoken a word, and I wanted everyone responsible for that place to burn. The Banshee's jump drive hadn't cooled from the last warp, so we used low sling velocity and spent 4 days creeping into the Caldera Drift sector under stealth. No signal, no movement, just the hum of ship systems and the echo of what we'd been through. In those 4 days we rebuilt ourselves. Every corridor buzzed with welding torches and toolkits. The weapons deck added a 3rd rail cannon, scavenged from a patrol cruiser we'd gutted 2 months ago. The AI reworked our decoy nodes, made them smarter, faster, unpredictable. Cora even reprogrammed one of the medical drones to carry microfusion cores. Why, I asked her, in case you want to leave a message, she said. I grinned. Caldera drift hung like a black tumor in space, an asteroid field wrapped around a hollowed-out planetoid patched together with external scaffolds and gravity clamps. Ships moved in and out like clockwork. Freyr's security units, transfer pods, not military grade. That was important. They weren't expecting a warship. I pinged the outer perimeter with a fake distress signal. A civilian convoy requesting fuel and aid. They responded with automated docking instructions. Perfect. We launched a drone to echo the signal, then we fired 3 rounds from our rail cannons, tore straight through the outer decks, severing the freighter ring and punching into the habitat module. Screams echoed over shortwave channels. Confused, disorganized. They didn't know who we were yet. They would. Ghost Team 9 boarded the midsection while the Banshee lit up their orbital defenses. We didn't ask for surrender. We weren't here to negotiate. We were here to erase. Inside, it was worse than I'd imagined. Rows of cells, naked humans hooked to machines, fed chemical loops that kept them docile and alive. Each person had a tag on their foot, color-coded based on what experiments they were part of. Some had been in there so long their skin had fused to the restraints. It wasn't science, it was butchery with lab coats. We shot every technician on site. No hesitation. One tried to surrender. Hands up, trembling. I asked him how long he'd worked here. He said 7 years. I shot him in the face before he finished the word 7. We found the central archive and dumped every file into our system. I knew what we were going to do next. Even before we cleared the last hallway, we weren't just going to destroy Caldera Drift. We were going to broadcast it. We wired cameras across every corridor. We looped footage of the worst rooms, the test cages, the broken children, the dissected bodies left to rot. We recorded every terrified scream, every failure of humanity that this station represented, and we played it back. Across the galaxy, we hijacked an ascendancy relay beacon, shoved our signal through every public network, every military channel, every civilian frequency from here to the galactic core, and over that footage I spoke. This is what the ascendancy does to humans. This is what your scientists build in the dark. This is what your empire protects. I paused, then I said it. We are done begging. We are done running from this moment on. Humanity is at war. You took our people, you took our future. Now we take your peace. And as the last image played, a small, eyeless boy hooked to a neural extractor, I gave the final command. Burn it. The drone we'd reprogrammed, the one carrying the fusion core, detonated in the heart of Caldera Drift. The explosion tore the asteroid apart. From the inside out, rock, steel, and blood turned to glowing debris, flung across space like sparks from a forge. We didn't stay to watch it all fall. We had other places to go. The fallout was immediate. The Ascendancy Council issued a formal declaration labeling all human forces galactic insurgents. A price was placed on our heads higher than any species in recorded history. They called us terrorists, liars, and unstable species incapable of civilized contact. But it was too late, because Earth heard our broadcast, and for the first time in 100 years, the colonies united. Mars closed its borders to non-human Traffic, Europa's shadow fleets came. Online, the remnants of RO7's miners, who'd barely survived the first purge, formed a militia. Even EarthGov, slow and scared as ever, issued a strategic defense directive and pulled assets from diplomatic stations, quietly without admitting anything. The war had gone public, no more shadows, no more hiding, just humanity. Angry, organized, and led by the Banshee. Back in the medbay, Drevin finally woke up. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the ceiling, eyes dull, body still weak. Then he whispered, "Did we win?" I shook my head. "Not yet," I said, "but they're bleeding." He looked at me, smile faint but full of fire. "Make them bleed more." We didn't get more than 12 hours after Caldera Drift before the retaliation began. They sent a fleet, not a patrol, not a token force, a fleet. 2 destroyers, 1 carrier-class cruiser, 4 interceptors, dozens of drones. They didn't just want revenge, they wanted to make an example of the Banshee. Too bad they didn't bring enough firepower. They found us refueling in the shadow of a gas giant, still bleeding reactor heat. From the drift blast, our shields were thin, the armor was cooked in sections. Hull integrity was borderline unstable. But they made one fatal assumption. They thought we'd run. Instead, we powered weapons and locked onto the carrier first. Drevin was barely standing, propped up on a brace in a dose of cortical stems, but he was back on the command rail, his voice colder than vacuum. "Target that cruiser's neck, snap it." And we did. 2 rail slugs, both guided by Cora's new rapid calc protocol, punched through the carrier's central spinal housing. Its reactor folded, then split, ejecting power cores into space. Like glowing bones, the ship cracked open and lit up the dark like sunrise. The destroyers scattered, and our interceptors hit them in mid-pivot. Ghost Team 9 skirmish ships, fast, ugly, and armed with heat lances, pounced like wolves. It wasn't a battle. It was a punishment. They came to crush us. They left in pieces. Only 1 drone escaped, limping through space with a shattered comms array and part of its hull slagged. We let it go. We wanted the message to spread. The Banshee needed repairs after that fight badly. We limped into a dead zone known only as Black Hollow, a stretch of void where navigation systems spun in loops and gravitational readings made no sense. Graveyard of failed colonies and lost ships, no ascendancy presence, no patrols, the perfect place to hide. While the engineers gutted and rewired half the ship, Drevin called me to the war room. He was pale, weakened, but he held himself together with hate and grit. "There's something you need to see," he said. He slid a data shard across the table. It was from the Caldera Drift archives, encrypted under 6 levels of firewall. Cora cracked it in under a minute. "What we found nearly stopped my heart. Project Origin, a joint ascendancy operation funded in secret by the Inner Council, a facility located at the galactic core, the cradle. No one ever talked about the galactic core, not because it was unreachable. Humans had mapped it long ago, but because the ascendancy forbade travel into it, claimed it was unstable. Dangerous, void-locked lies. The cradle was real, buried deep inside a folded starfield, hidden behind layers of cloaked satellites and distortion fields. Place where gravity bent light and time, slowed just enough to make long-term experiments. Different. Inside, the ascendancy was building Something, not a weapon, not a fleet, a hybrid. The files labeled it H0M0. Reactus. A human ascendancy, genetic splicing. Program. They weren't just studying us, they were trying to become us. They've seen what we are, Drevin said. His voice low. They've seen that nothing else in the galaxy fights like we do, bleeds like we do, survives like we do. And now they want to copy it, I muttered. Not copy. His eyes burned. Replace. It made sense. Why enslave us if they could breed their own version of us, one they could control? That was their endgame, not domination, eraser. Every war, every colony raid, every stolen child, they were gathering raw material. The Banshee didn't wait. Within 12 hours, we rerouted reactor flow to triple jump capacity, overclocked our long-range nav cores, and dove into the coordinates buried in the origin file. The cradle was hidden behind a massive gravity distortion field that fried most scanners, but we had a workaround. The ghost jump. We killed every system. No heat, no lights, pure inertia and silence. No one would see us coming, and when we arrived, we wouldn't ask questions. We'd break their gods. Cradle wasn't a station. It was a planet, artificial, constructed from repurposed moons and scrap worlds. Colossal sphere VN with pulsing light hovering in the gravitational well of a collapsed star. Orbiting it were 6 black monoliths, each the size of a dreadnought, forming a perfect ring. Every 10 minutes, a pulse ran through them, creating a momentary window in the field. That's how we got in. Cora timed our jump to the millisecond. We burned through the anomaly just as it blinked open and slipped beneath the cradle's skin like a virus. Inside, we didn't find a war zone. We found a cathedral. The corridors were massive, not built for humans, not even built for ascendancy officers. They were built for something new, something still growing. Each chamber was a lab, genetic tanks, cloning pods, vast arenas with observation decks built into the walls. And in the center, suspended in stasis, a figure, humanoid, human face, ascendancy spinal build, eyes closed but breathing. Designation H1, Cora whispered. First hybrid. I stared at it and I felt nothing but rage. This thing was there. Answer to us, not to fight us, to replace us, to build soldiers that obey. Soldiers without guilt, without soul, without rebellion. Soldiers that would never ask why. I gave the order, kill it. We set charges across the facility, every tank, every control hub, every specimen. We flooded their mainframe with every broadcast we'd made since Row 7. Every human scream, every act of resistance. We made sure they'd hear our message. When the fire came, you can't recreate us, you can't mimic what you don't understand, and you will never ever break what you didn't build. The last thing I did before we left was walk up to the hybrid stasis tank and stare into its face. It looked like me. Almost too perfect, too hollow. I placed a single explosive charge at its base and whispered, "You're not us, you never were." Then we left. The Banshee jumped just as the cradle ignited behind us. Flames chewing through artificial structures. Gravity collapsing inward. That planet, their holy project, became a funeral pea. And we watched it burn from orbit that night as we drifted beyond the stars. Light Drevin looked out from the bridge viewport and said, "It's not enough." I knew what he meant. We'd killed their project. We hadn't killed the idea. They Still believed they were above us, still believed we were animals pretending to be soldiers. That was going to change. Not through words, not through diplomacy, but through the sound of their world crumbling beneath our boots. We thought the cradle was the end, the final layer of the Ascendancy's nightmare factory. We thought destroying it would send shock waves through their empire, their genetic ambitions, collapse the idea that humans could be cloned, bent, or recreated. But we were wrong. The cradle was never their final play. It was bait, a distraction, a ritual of blood and failure made just convincing enough to make us think we'd won. We should have known. The Ascendancy doesn't rely on just science. They believe in legacy, ancient constructs, and genetic memory passed down through entire bloodlines. While we burned their holy lab, while we flooded their data with human screams, they were already moving their real weapon into place. They didn't build it. They stole it. The signal came through 2 days later. A scrambled distress beacon, human frequency, fractured and messy, buried under static, like a memory clawing its way out of the grave. Cora played it back in fragments. Name is Sergeant Keene. I was on Mars Defense Unit 12. They took us, but I escaped. Warning, they built something out of. Then silence. Keene, I remember that name. He'd been listed KIA during the Red Harvest. Failed mission 2 years ago where an entire Earth outpost disappeared during a ceasefire period. They said the atmosphere killed them. Another lie. Another cover-up. The signal had coordinates deep in neutral space. No outposts, no colonies, just a floating research platform tethered to the edge of a dying moon. It was a trap, but we went anyway because if Keene was alive, we owed it to him. And if this was a lie, then someone would pay. The station didn't have a name, just a designation. Code ARX9. No comms, no welcome beacon, no response to hails. We had to burn our way in through the airlock. Ghost Team 9 boarded with Drevin at my side, his arm still twitching from neural stem damage, but his grip firm on the pulse rifle. Inside it was quiet. Too quiet. There was no gravity, no heat. The walls were caked in frost. Power cables hung like vines from the ceiling, dripping moisture. Bodies floated in the main chamber, not fresh, frozen, some with their eyes wide open, human, others not quite. The far wall had a symbol etched into it, burned in by plasma. Ascendancy emblem, but altered, sharper, fractured. Underneath it in English, born of Earth, refined by fire, crowned by the void. We didn't understand it, not until we found him. He was in the command module, alone, sitting strapped to a rusted chair with cables drilled into his spine, feeding into the ship's control systems. His eyes were open, but they weren't human anymore. They glowed a deep violet, veins blackened from chemical augmentation. But the face was unmistakable. Sergeant Keene. He looked up when we entered, and for a second, just 1 second, there was recognition. Then it was gone. I dreamed of silence, he said, but they wouldn't let me sleep. Drevin stepped forward. Keene, it's me. You're too late, Keene said, his voice echoing like it wasn't only his. I was the test they never meant to survive. And now I am the result. We raised our weapons. He didn't flinch. Instead, the walls opened and hell came through. It wasn't just Keene. They'd grafted him into the station's neural core, used his trauma, his memories, his instincts as fuel. His brain had been torn apart, rebuilt and reprogrammed to operate. Like a weaponized AI, the platform itself was now an extension of him. Turrets dropped from the ceiling, razor. Drones activated, gas vents hissed. Toxins into the air, he didn't control them with buttons or voice commands. He was them. Why fight for people who left you to die? He asked through the intercom. Why serve a world that lies, buries its dead under politics and pretends it cares? I wanted to respond. I wanted to say something righteous, something honorable, but Drevin beat me to it. We're not fighting for Earth, he growled. We're fighting for revenge. Keen laughed, then welcome to it. Doors sealed behind us, we fought. Through 6 corridors, took casualties. Private Shira bled out in a depressurized tunnel. One of the drones took off Sergeant Torque's arm before it exploded from a lucky round. We planted charges at every core node, trying to force a shutdown, but every time we pushed forward, the walls changed. Keen learned us just like the creature on the Helios trap, only worse, because this time it wasn't artificial intelligence adapting to our movements. It was a human mind trained like us, forged in our tactics, our instincts, but twisted into something sharp and hollow. He anticipated our flanks. He jammed our reload patterns. He mocked our dead. You left me in the soil of Mars, he said. Now I bloom in the dark. Drevin had had enough. He overrode the fail-safe and triggered a local EMP. Burst from his own suit. It fried half our tech. It also severed Keen's loop just long enough to cut him off from the drones. We stormed the control core. There he was, still strapped, still alive but twitching. Blood leaked from his nose. His pupils had returned to normal. Do it, he said. What? I asked. Kill me. I hesitated. He was human again for now, but Drevin didn't wait. One shot through the head, fast, silent. Keen's body slumped. The platform's lights dimmed and the station began to shake. Cora's voice cracked through our earpieces. They knew you'd find this place. It was never about retrieving the acid. It was about exposing it. What do you mean? I asked. They let you. When? She said. They needed you to broadcast this. They needed humans to see what could happen to a loyal soldier. Fear is more contagious than war. I looked at Keen's body, still warm, still human, just broken. I'm not broadcasting this, I said. I'm erasing it. Drevin nodded. We left enough charges to turn the entire station into space dust, and this time we didn't watch it burn. We just left, silent, bitter, and cold. Back on the Banshee, we didn't celebrate. We didn't speak for hours. Even Cora stayed quiet. When I finally sat down in the war room, Drevin was already there, sitting in the dark, staring at a file. Keen's file? I asked. He shook his head. No. The next target. I glanced at the holo map. It was Earth, but not ours, not the real one, a replica, buried in an Ascendancy archive facility, one we'd never touched, one that had stayed off every blacklist, every recon map, every whisper network. It was called Simulacrum 1, a training ground, a place where they ran simulations of Earth to practice how to invade it, to test their soldiers, to prepare for the final blow. They've been planning this for decades, Drevin said. I nodded, feeling something inside me boil to the surface. Not rage this time. Resolve. Then let's end it. We didn't sleep before the final jump, not because of protocol, because we couldn't. The ship was too quiet, the kind of quiet that creeps into your ears and presses down on your skull like deep water. Every soldier aboard the Banshee knew what this was. Our last ride, not. Everyone would come back, some already hadn't, and the rest of us had stopped, pretending we were still fighting to win. We were fighting to finish it. Drevin sat alone in the forward observation deck, no lights, just starlight and silence. He looked older, now bone-tired, his face more scar than skin, eyes sunk deep in the sockets, but the fire hadn't dimmed, not once. I sat beside him, neither of us speaking for a long while. Then he said almost too quietly, "They built a copy of Earth to practice killing it. That's not strategy, that's obsession." "Fear," I said. He nodded. "They fear us so much they had to study how to undo us. They should have studied harder." We jumped in near Jupiter 12, outside the shadow of a black gas giant. From that distance, Simulacrum 1 looked perfect. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents shaped like the ones we'd left behind. Even the satellite rings looked right, orbital paths mimicking Earth's defense grid, but it was wrong. In the way a mannequin is wrong. Everything too still, too symmetrical. We ran deep scans, no population but plenty of heat signatures, military bases, drone hangars, atmospheric artillery. They weren't just training there, they were waiting. "This isn't a base," Cora said over the main display. "It's a proving ground. They simulate invasions, train troops in how humans fight, how they retreat, where they hide." She paused. "And they've simulated you, Commander Varric, you, Captain Drevin. The Banshee." "What?" I said. "Logs pulled from their data archives," she explained. "They've studied every battle you fought, run it over and over, thousands of times, each time trying to find a different outcome. And they haven't found one." We launched in silence, no fanfare, no final speech. Just orders, 3 drop teams, 1 strike team led by Drevin, aiming for their command relay, 1 infiltration team with Ghost 9 set to disable their atmospheric defense systems, and me running the core charge personally. We didn't want to just bomb this place. We wanted to erase the idea of it. This was not a facility, it was a blueprint for extinction, and if we left it standing, there'd always be another plan, another hybrid, another Keen. We landed near fake city center built to look like old Chicago. Skyscrapers half destroyed, vehicles overturned, street signs faded, with fake blood splattered on the sidewalk. All too staged, like someone's idea of what Earth would look like if it lost. "I don't like this," said Sergeant Vance. "Too quiet." "Keep moving," I replied. Every street was a memory twisted wrong. Fake Earth flags hanging limp, burnt school buses, crushed playgrounds, all fake, but the message was real. They had studied our death, planned it in detail, and they were proud of it. We breached the central grid facility just after nightfall. Night, even their sky followed Earth's orbit, complete with artificial moonlight and cold wind pumped through ducted towers to mimic atmosphere. It felt like a funeral. Inside the facility, we didn't find guards. We found observers, dozens of ascendancy figures in long robes seated in a circular hall lined with holographic displays. They turned when we burst in, calm, almost smug. "You've come to destroy what we've built." One said. "No," I replied, "I've come to destroy what you dreamed." Another smirked. "But you are here, are you not, here in this house of mirrors, where everything you do we predicted." "You didn't predict this," I said, "and Open the core box, inside the Genesis. Core, a one-time use quantum implosion. Device, no explosion, no light, just eraser. Designed by humans, stolen from the ascendancy, turned into a weapon they'd never see coming, the observers realized. Too late. By the time they reached for alarms, Dreven's strike team had already severed. The power conduits, Ghost 9 had fried their satellites. The Banshee was already pulling back, engines primed. I stayed behind. Someone had to arm the core manually, and I didn't care anymore. The countdown began. 5 minutes. The observers screamed at me in their tongue I didn't understand, didn't care. I walked into their central data vault, grenaded the neural servers, and used their own console to broadcast one final message. This is not your world. It never was. You can build as many shadows of Earth as you want, but we are the flame and we don't live in shadows. I sat down in their high chair, the one built to monitor human behavior, and waited for the fire. I thought of Row 7. I thought of the girl with wires in her spine. I thought of Keen. I thought of the real Earth. And I smiled, except I didn't die. I woke up in the Banshee's medbay. 2 days later, Cora had overridden the core's final trigger, delaying it just long enough for a last-second evac beam to pull me out. Dreven had ordered it against my explicit instructions. You idiot, I said, groggy, furious. Grateful, he grinned, wrapped in gauze. Half his face bandaged. Too easy to die, he rasped. You don't get to leave me with these rookies. Simulacrum 1. Gone, not just destroyed, gone. The Genesis core didn't just collapse the facility, it folded its matter into subspace, crushed it into nothingness. The entire moon destabilized. The orbiting constructs were vaporized. All records purged. The ascendancy has no copy of Earth now, no model, no simulation, no plan, and their last message before going dark, a simple transmission. They don't fight like us. They fight like ghosts, and they never stop. We didn't go home after that. The Banshee became a myth. Stories passed between colony freighters, whispered in mercenary bars. They say she appears without warning, that she leaves no survivors, that when she arrives, humanity is watching, and she's not here to negotiate. She's here to remind the stars of the worst mistake they ever made, looking at a human warship for the first time and underestimating what came. Moments